On this episode of the Roots and Reflections podcast, I sit down with the president and CEO of Frank Miller Lumber, Steve James. Family owned for 120 years, Frank Miller Lumber is among the world's largest quarter-sawn hardwood lumber producers. Our conversation touches on Steve's early career with General Motors, making the jump to the hardwood industry, and how his leadership philosophy helped reshape the culture at Frank Miller Lumber. Now sit back and enjoy my conversation with Steve James. Hey, Steve. Thanks for joining me on the Roots and Reflections podcast today. I originally met you last summer. We were actually on site filming at Frank Miller Lumber. We had a great time working with you and your team. You were incredibly accommodating. And just through that opportunity to work with you, I heard a lot of interesting stories, and I thought you'd be a great person to have on the podcast. So welcome, and thanks for joining me.
Hey, it's really an honor for me to be here with you guys. Like I said, we had such a great time when you guys were here, and then when you asked me to do this, I just thought it was a great way to tell our story again, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's start from the beginning. You are a U of M grad. So tell me about your college years. I know looking through, your history, your career history, a lot of your career is focused on kind of the finance and accounting side. Is that something that you were always interested in, or is that a career path you kind of found during college?
It was interesting. I was always great in math. My mom wanted me to be an accountant. I actually wanted to be a psychologist. And then when I looked at what the requirements were, because psychologist versus an accountant, I kind of chose the accountant route and took a couple of psychology classes on the side. And so I became a full-time accountant and a part-time therapist, right? It kind of worked.
I get you. So after your undergrad, you ended up going to grad school. It looked like there was a bit of a break in between undergrad and grad school. So what did you do during that time, and what kind of led you to study manufacturing in grad school?
Yeah, sure. So I actually started with General Motors as a college co-op in 84. Got hired on in 89, and really part of the program there in the finance group was you had to have an MBA. And at the time, it was pretty online stuff and whatnot, so I actually had to go to the class. I was just starting a family, and I found it really difficult to make it that. And then the other piece is that part of my rotation, I knew I had to do a 2-year stint at a remote facility, which obviously then I'd have to stop my MBA, or I'd have to figure out that whole thing. And at the time, GM owned Kettering University, which was GMI in engineering at the time. And they had, that was kind of the precursor to online. They actually used to videotape the class, and then they send out VHSs to us. And so we'd actually watch the VHS, and then we'd have proctors at the facility, so we'd take our test. And so at the time, I convinced them that I didn't need my MBA, that I could get this master's in manufacturing management, which was really actually a technical degree because there were some engineering classes in it. So that's the route that we eventually ended up on. But it took us a few years to figure that out.
So, you got your start with GM early on, and it seems like you spent a good chunk of your career with them. What was it like working with one of the big automotive giants like that?
It was really interesting. For me, it was exciting, right? I mean, the thing about that, at the time, we were one of the world's largest employers, and being an executive there, of all the, GM gets a fair amount of negative press here with the union and management and whatnot, but they provided a great opportunity for me. I learned a ton there. They had a lot of that. So for me, it was just a great experience. The other piece of it was kind of funny. So in the 27 years I worked there, I had 22 different job assignments. So that was, again, so I wasn't like a lot of the people where they just go and they work for 30 years and whatnot. So it was, for me, it was like I said, it was exciting.
So over those, numerous jobs that you had within the company, how did you find that path? Is it something that you just kind of, opportunities came up throughout, or did you have sort of a direction that you wanted to follow?
So they basically, when you start out, they kind of put you in this training program, and then you kind of follow it. And then at some point in time, then you kind of choose where you want to go and whatnot. So that's kind of the path that we have. And again, most of the executives in the finance group, we're on 3-year assignments. I mean, the most I ever worked any place was 3 years. A lot of them were 1-year stints, and you just kind of moved on.
And you worked, a good chunk of your career with D-Max in Dayton, correct?
Yep. Yeah, that was the last couple of years there. Yep.
So what was that experience like? What did you do there? What was it like working specifically with, an engine manufacturer? Because they basically produced all the Duramax diesel engines, correct?
Yeah. So at the time when we were there, they had all we only made the V8 there. So it was, I was the CFO, so I was the kind of the number 2 guy there. What really helped me and really in my job now is I got a lot of international exposure, right? So I got to visit Japan, I got to visit Poland. We had a sister company over there that produced the European engines for them. So I got a lot of international experience, got a lot to look at again. And the diesel engine is a very, very complex engine to make. I mean, it's got thousands of parts to it. So that was a big piece of that there. So yeah, it was kind of cool to be like I said, the CFO of a joint venture.
So, with all that international travel and, your years with GM and with D-Max specifically, I'm sure you have a lot of interesting stories. Are there any specific stories or anecdotes or memories that really stand out to you?
Yeah, of all the time I was there, there's 2 really moments that I'm really proud of. So I actually got to spend a 2-year stint in portfolio planning, and I actually got to write the business plan for the Hummer H3 to bring to market, and the Chevy SSR. So really 2 iconic vehicles. If you think about it, GM had just purchased the Hummer brand, so the H3 was bringing the Hummer brand into the mainstream economy here in the U.S. And then obviously the Chevy SSR was that iconic halo vehicle for the Chevy truck. So those were really 2 very, very stressful years in my life. I mean, think about that. You have to bring this brand new product. You have to basically sell it to the strategy board. And so it was pretty intense, but again, that's kind of cool to be associated with those 2 vehicles.
So does that give you a little swell of pride every time you see an H3 driving down the street?
Oh, absolutely. I still want to see what they are, right? I just remember at the time, I think we had the perfect vehicle, except for the engine wasn't great. And then it was kind of ironic that I went to an engine plant after that, right?
So around 2012, I believe, is when you started with Frank Miller Lumber. So that's obviously a big transition moving from the automotive industry into the hardwood industry. How did that opportunity arise, and what ultimately kind of made you make that decision to make the jump from automotive to hardwoods?
Yeah, well, the easy answer, it was God's plan. It no longer became my plan. It was God's plan. So at the end of 2011, I mean, obviously all the stuff that happened with GM, the bankruptcy and whatnot, it was a drain every day going into work. And so I needed to change. And so I left there at the end of 2011. And then I was at this holiday party and met this executive recruiter. And so I've kind of given her a little of my background and whatnot. And she said, "Man, I had the perfect job for you." But I just filled it. It was a CFO at Frank Miller. And we got them both chuckled. I'm like, well, we never know if it's a perfect job or not, right? Because you've just filled it. Fast forward another month or so later, and she called me back and she goes, "Hey, the candidate didn't accept the position. Would you still be willing to interview for it?" And, at the time I'm like, yeah, sure, why not, right? Again, I didn't know anything about lumber. But I came and the president at the time, he was talking about, I have this 110-year-old family-owned lumber company. I'm trying to rebrand it. I'm really struggling with some cost associated with it. And then I have this gain share program that I'm really trying to implement, which is right in my wheelhouse, right? I'm like, hey, you know what? What the heck? Why not come and do this? And so that's kind of what led me to the transition. Fast forward about a year into that, a little over a year, and it was unfortunate. And I said, so that's kind of the transition from the CFO to the CEO. It became evident that he was clearly over his head in the manufacturing, running a manufacturing company, which again, throughout my career at GM, I was always at a facility, right? And the plant manager didn't necessarily know what was going on, but it was my job to get them there. I'm like, hey, no problem. I will help you succeed here. And we put forth a lot of great programs in place. But I think at some point in time, I started to intimidate him as a threat. And then it was just the working relationship got really bad. And finally, I think it was the end of October of 2013, I really went to the family and said, hey, you know what? You got a great company. I think we have a great product. What we want, what you guys want, I just can't work with this guy. I just can't work with him. And I said, so I'm leaving. It was kind of funny. The chairman at the time, she's like, Steve, just hold on for a few months and whatnot. I got to figure some stuff out. Go sit in your office and then try to play nice, right? And so I don't know why I did that, right? As I said when I talked earlier, this is just, it's not in my hands anymore. And so I did. I waited. But I told her, I said, I'm positive that, and she had to go away for a few months and whatnot. I said, I'm positive that he's going to fire me before you get back. And sure enough, on Valentine's of 2014, he met with the lawyers to go ahead and let me go. And then they got word of it and whatnot. And so we kind of just allowed at that point to allow him to really leave the company and then transition me into the CEO role. So again, I there's no reason why I'm at this, rural Indiana town in the lumber industry, except for I think this is just my purpose now.
That's great. And it's funny, I'd never actually heard the story about how you transitioned from CFO to CEO. So I guess going back to your start with Frank Miller Lumber, you kind of touched on it. I want to dig into that a little bit more. What were some of the biggest learning curves coming from automotive to hardwoods in terms of manufacturing management?
Yeah, the biggest thing was actually teaching them that manufacturing is manufacturing, whether you're selling cars or lumber or widgets, right? That's all about cost and sales, and so that was really tough for me to understand their business model and how it worked, and then really trying to express to them that basically we had to be a little more strategic in our thinking. And like I said, you've kind of been in the industry for a while, and we just sometimes produce as much as we can and hope that we find market for it someplace. And so we've tried to change that and really trying to change the mindset here, that it really is very strategic in nature. It's not about growing the top line. You have to make sure that there's a balance there.
So, one of the things that stood out to me when we were there is Frank Miller is fairly diversified. You have, a lot of your export sales, you have, more like wholesale lumber, but you also have your retail store on site. So is that something that Frank Miller Lumber has always done, or is that something that you brought in as a strategic move?
Nope. So they've had the retail store since the mid '90s. So they've always had that. We've grown it a little bit, and we're still in the process of growing it some more to do some more outreach for them. I think their vision was just to have some place that the local guys could come and really buy some lumber and kind of hang out for a little bit. So we've changed the approach a little bit, but it's always been all of those been here.
So do you find that over, the course of your career with Frank Miller Lumber, that breadth of products or, revenue streams has helped weather various storms with, good economy, bad economy, various parts of the industry being down?
Yeah, that's really what's going to be our survival. And that's really what we're taking a look at. As from the lumber industry, our core product, again, our quartered and rift lumber that we sell, I said wholesale and to a lot of distributors and then we have some in for, foreign users and whatnot. But, that's stable. It's not, I don't think it's going to grow. Just to be honest with you, I think it's pretty stable. I think we're going to get that market share in that volume. But really our opportunities are in whether it's the retail store, our byproducts. Again, we have the USA Woods that actually has been brought on since I've been here. So we have a brokerage firm, international sales. I think those are the things that will allow us to really be sustainable going forward.
Going back to we kind of discussed your learning curve in the industry. let's look at the flip side of that. What do you think that you were able to take from your time in the automotive industry that really was beneficial to you as you came into the hardwood side and with Frank Miller Lumber?
Yeah, so there's a couple things, right? It's really the lean manufacturing approach. It was interesting. I was brought in to do this gain share program, and that was really just it wasn't very good. It wasn't very well thought out. But the lean manufacturing principles that we brought here to really say, am I using the equipment that I have fully and making sure that I'm making products that people want? The other thing is communication, right? And typically when you take a look at most manufacturing companies, and I hope that we're changing some of the tides here, but you still look at most manufacturing managers and whatnot, and they believe that they have jobs for employees and they got to fill the job. And what we've changed here is the mindset is that we are here to support the employee, and our job is to make it more enticing for them to come to work today than to stay home. And when you think about that, it seems so easy to do, but no one's focusing on that. And that's what we focus on really well. In fact, I contribute that to why we have not had a need for employees. We are full to our capacity. We've been that way really pre-pandemic, but I think that has a lot to do with it. Is that we are there to provide tools to the employee to get them to come to work. My other thing is I tell them is like, you've always heard you got to find the right seat on the bus for people. Sometimes you find the right people and you have to adjust the seat. And I think that's our new cause is that we have some folks here that are great for Frank Miller Lumber that may not fill out a traditional job assignment, right? So if I had to go get that function, they probably don't do that the best, but they work the best for Frank Miller in their skill set. And so we're trying to do those things. And I think it's really changed the culture here from kind of being this, it's a hard work environment, and it still is. But it's how do I entice them to say, hey, there's more to it than just a job.
So you actually touched on my next question, which is, like I said, when we were there last summer, you brought up, sort of the culture change and the shift and how you did that over some time. Can you tell me a little bit more about, how you identified the need for that culture change and, what that process was like to change the culture and, ultimately how that's improved the company?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. You always start out with your, I'm a Maxwell coach, and my favorite book of his is Sometimes You Win, Sometimes You Learn. So there's a lot of learnings that I had at GM and watching the culture there. When you talk about a culture and really be demoralized, and we went through my whole career, basically, we were cost cutting the whole time I was there, and you can't cost cut your way through it. And the people were left kind of depressed and whatnot. It was hard for me to be motivated to go in to try and cheer them up when I knew that we were cutting more cost out of the company. So when we started here, we really said, hey, from a leadership team, I'm going to teach you how to be a leader, not a manager. And so we set up, so the leadership team went through the 5 levels of leadership, right? And said, hey, here's how you become a productive leader. First, you have some empathy for the employee, but then you also have to require them and make them accountable. When you can figure out that balance, they're going to be more productive for you. So we're actually, it's kind of funny. So our volume is probably, in total since I got here, probably down 20%. But our margin is up, significantly. Sales are up significantly. So again, we're buying the right product at the right price and not have to go through, again, a lot of hard labor to do that. And like I said, it's really just trying to change that mindset. Our guys out here love us, right? I go out there, I'm on the floor a lot, and I think they just know that they're being heard and that you care about them, right? I still believe that, one of Maxwell's favorite quotes is, they're not going to work for you until they know you care about them. And I truly believe that to my core. And again, I think that we're showing progress from that.
So you mentioned sort of the analogy of the right seat on the bus versus adjusting the seat. Did you find that you had a lot of, longtime employees that rather than them leaving the company that you were able to help them find a better fit that they're, sort of now thriving in?
Absolutely. In fact, we just made another switch with our superintendent, right? He's getting on the retirement age, and he's like, I don't really want to retire. So now we're transitioning him into another spot that he's really good at, right? In that now he can feel like he's adding value versus feel like he's in the way, right? So we can actually, bring up some other folks, and then he still has a function here. I think the telling thing is all our older employees ask us, hey, after I retire, can I work part-time? Can I find a spot here? Again, what it says to me is that I'd rather come to work than stay home. And so you're building this really great atmosphere here.
So with the guys coming back to, to work part-time in retirement, do you find that there's a coveted job that everyone fights over? Is it, manning the retail store or anything in particular?
No, they just want to continue to do their job, except for like some of our maintenance guys. Now they're really kind of the knowledge set versus the hands-on cranking it out. But they want to be here to share their knowledge with the next guys that are stepping in. So that's really, I think it says a lot about who we have as employees, and really what they want to do is that they don't have a problem sharing that knowledge with another person to make them more successful.
So one of the things you mentioned is being a Maxwell coach. And I remember when we were there over the summer, you mentioned, a couple of different of your experiences outside of work, whether that be volunteer experiences. I know you're on the, board member for a couple of different organizations. How do you think those, experiences outside of work play into, how you make decisions, how you interact with people in your day-to-day role?
There's a couple things that come to mind. The first one really is I'm on all these boards to tell the Frank Miller story, right? And I think that's where some people don't get that. Quite honestly, I think that it's about me, right? But it's not about me. It's about telling the Frank Miller story because, again, I think my two main responsibilities is one, make sure that internally we have a sustainable product and a sustainable business model. And the other one is we have to recruit the next generation of workers. So I'm out there telling the Frank Miller lumber story. But at the same time, what's amazing with this group of individuals here in Randolph County is there's a lot of like-minded people. And when I say like-minded, it is not personal for them. They want to make sure that the county is going to be successful. And I think that's the power of all these groups that I've been in. I'm at the YMCA, I was at the chamber and the economic development. And when you start listening to that, and I do think that Randolph County is special in the fact and who they have on a lot of these boards is that they really want to see the community thrive. And you don't see that, and you certainly don't see that in the big cities, and you certainly don't see that in a lot of the other places that I've been. But this community is pretty special.
So that tied in the community, it actually just made me think of the story you were telling when we were there last summer, how you've interacted with some of the local trade schools to help drive kind of the reinvigoration of teaching the trades. And, I think that's kind of a national issue right now is, as a whole, we're sort of diminishing the value of teaching a trade, right? And I know you were telling us how with some of the local schools, you're helping to kind of rebuild some of those programs one, it's a win-win, right? It helps drive new talent and experienced talent to Frank Miller Lumber, but it also is sort of, reviving that local school.
Yeah. So I actually am involved in several of these projects. One where we're working with one of the local schools that they have this new program. It's called PTech. Right. And again, so they're just starting freshmen coming in. There's 12 of them that are there. And so we've been working with them. It was really cool. So we actually gave them a marketing project, right, as how to really market red oak better than what we figured out as an industry. And it's amazing watching these kids at that age interact, right? They were telling us stuff that we've been here for quite some time that we didn't know. And so same thing there is that we're getting them involved, getting that group there. There's another one that I actually a part of, which is it's interesting. I'm the only manufacturing guy that's in this group, but our 3 school systems here in the area are creating this. It's basically a rural alliance zone. It's called RAS 32. And again, and they have all these pathways for these kids to go on. One of them is a manufacturing pathway, which we're very integral in that piece of it again. But it's teaching the welding classes and advanced manufacturing, getting these kids involved back in the trades. Like you said, there for a while that they kind of shun, like, you were kind of a loser if you went to a trade versus college. And all of a sudden these kids can, walk out of high school, basically no debt, 6 months away from a journeyman's card. So it's just a great process for the kids that they actually now have that opportunity. And a lot of these kids, quite honestly, they were on a path to quit high school. They just didn't really see that traditional high school wasn't for them. And all of a sudden they're engaged and excited about that. And so when you can do that as an industry partner, man, that there's no better feeling than that. And watching these kids thrive in some of this stuff.
Yeah, that's great. I actually saw that you just released a video on Red Oak. Is that something that came out of that marketing project?
Yeah, we had we were kind of in the process of doing that, but we actually had the kids kind of come up with some of the stuff, and so that there was some of that played in that. Yeah,
very cool. So I would imagine Frank Miller Lumber has got to be one of the bigger, if not the biggest, employers in that area. Union City's not huge. So over the course of your career there, have you seen sort of a shift in how Frank Miller's role or reputation in the community has changed?
Yeah, I think we've always been community minded. So we've always tried to support the one local city that we're in. But we've always supported the community. What we're doing now, like I said, it's not just a financial donation, right? It's we're actually putting my time in that, putting some others' time in that. And again, I think if you talk to the local officials around here, they would tell you how significant Frank Miller Lumber is. And I suspect it's probably more so since I've taken over than before. So we had some folks that were really just kind of internally focused, and I've kind of flipped it a little bit and been much more openly, out in the environment, really telling our story to them. Because like I said, there's still a lot of people here that don't understand how big of an employer Frank Miller is, that, we sell worldwide, and they just think that we sell to Lowe's, right?
Right. So it's early in the year, it's a new year. As we look forward to 2024, is there anything that you are excited about on the horizon with Frank Miller Lumber? Do you guys have any new initiatives? What are you looking forward to?
For us, it's making sure that we continue to take care of our employee, right? And that's still the number one. And then really what we're doing now is trying to reach out to the customers, right? Understanding who the customers of our customers are. And we're sending out sample kits to them, red and white oak, and trying to understand their business a little bit better. And then really trying to grow that revenue stream, right? We obviously there's issues with byproducts from the lumber companies and whatnot, whether it's chips or dust or mulch and whatnot. And so we're exploring some revenues there. And then we're trying to look at what our retail store looks like and some of the product offerings. So like I said, the core is pretty solid. Now it's saying what other revenue streams that we can get and looking how we can do it a little more efficiently.
I think reflecting, we just talked about looking forward. Now I kind of want to flip it around and look backwards and reflect a little bit. Both reflecting on your career as a whole and also just sort of in your day-to-day job. What do you enjoy most about working in the hardwood industry?
It's just the people. I mean, it's really amazing, coming from, and I know that probably all the industries are changed since I started at GM, but GM was so secretive, so, don't share anything with anybody, even sometimes internally, right? But coming here, I met so many different people from so many different companies and whatnot, and they're all willing to share their stories, all giving you their advice and what not to do, and that, and I just think it's the people here. I really think it's, again, the same thing. It's a community environment where, where competitors, kind of by day, but in the evenings and whatnot, we're just really trying to figure out how to survive this. So it's really the people are just been fascinated, and I just find it overwhelming to see just the camaraderie, and I'm sure that you've experienced that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. Everybody I talk to, that's sort of almost always the recurring answer. It's the people. The last podcast we did, it's the people. It's just, I think it rings true. I mean, that's why I came. I worked in the industry for a number of years with Elims, and then went out on my own, started my own business, and served a broader group of industries. And ultimately, we came back and refined our focus on the hardwood industry, and that was the biggest piece of it. It was the people factor. You sort of mentioned having stories from your time at Frank Miller Lumber or various people. Is there any one story, whether it's a funny story or a fond memory? What really stands out to you about your time with Frank Miller Lumber?
I guess for me, like I said, it's really the leadership team that I have here. Most of them had worked here. We really only had, I think, Tyler's probably the only one that we brought in, and Chelsea to that mix, but the rest of them weren't here. But this leadership team is really, really impressive. So for me to actually be a part of their growing process has really meant the world to me. I trust these people. I was gonna say guys, but people with my life. I will take them to battle with me anywhere, and I know that they'll come out and be successful. I look at it as, again, we've changed the mindset here as well. It's not all our challenges aren't problems. All our challenges are opportunities. And that's the way my team looks at it is, hey, again, we had a little setback, but where's the opportunities that we're going to get from this? So it's really, for me, it's that leadership team there. Like I said, there's lots of funny stories that we could go on, but really that's the most important one. It's just the team and how grateful I am to have them.
Yeah, from my personal experience being there, it's evident that culture that you sort of instilled there, and you and your team have instilled there. I think my favorite memory of our experience there is obviously, so we were there to film a video with DMSI, so with your inventory software provider. And when we first got there and we were looking for a place to film, we just sort of said, I think my approach is always, I want to be the least intrusive piece of it, right? Like, I don't want you to have to do a bunch of things to accommodate us. And we basically said, hey, can we just find a spot in your warehouse that kind of looks cool? Maybe there's some lumber in the back. And your team basically said, yeah, well, what if we move this? And, well, that's great. If you don't have to, but you can. And I think we went and grabbed lunch with you and came back, and they had literally built us a filming set. They had moved 10 or 15 bundles around. They had repainted. They had done all these things, and it ultimately made the video really, really awesome. But it was just that, we didn't ask. They just sort of took it upon themselves to do, more than we asked, go above and beyond. And that, and that was everybody we talked to was like that.
Yeah. And I said, I think that's what makes us special. Right. And again, that's our unique story. And I said, it took a bit to create that, but now, like you said, they'll do anything for any of us. Right. It's like, hey, without complaining, without question, it's like, hey, let's just go get that done. Cause they know at the end of the day, if your job, makes your job better, it makes their lives easier. And I think that's critical for us.
Absolutely. So we're less than a week away now, I guess, at this point from the IHLA convention. I know all the trade shows always get me really excited. And Frank Miller Lumber is actually one of the bigger sponsors of the convention this year. So what are you looking forward to about the convention next week?
A couple of things. One, I'm actually going to be introduced on the board of directors, so I got to learn a lot of things through that week. And then really, for me, the exciting part is getting the gauge on what everybody else is saying about the year. This is really our first opportunity to get with everybody, and so you start to hear what's happened in January, what's happened in the quarter, and you can kind of gauge what's going on with the year. I'm not the most social guy out there, but I'll do a fair amount of networking and whatnot to really, get with the folks that again, I learn a lot from talking to them. And so we'll get that. And so, yeah, that's kind of, like I said, for me, that's what it's about, is getting that gauge. And then really just got to catch up with some old friends.
Absolutely. And, congrats on the being named to the board. Tell me a little bit more about that. How does that opportunity come about?
I'm not quite sure on the whole process, but I know that they have a nominating committee, and I know that they nominated me last year, and I did make it, and I think they did some sort of campaign to allow me to get on this year. So it starts, I think, probably in the October-November timeframe, and then they ask if you'd be willing to do that. So, like I said, I was just coming off all the other boards that I was on, so I had some time. And it's really that gives me an opportunity. I think, for me is hopefully it's a win-win, right? I can learn a lot of stuff from them, but I can also share just my unique take on the industry and some of the processes that they have in place that I either need to understand better or maybe help them find a different way.
Well, I'm certainly looking forward to seeing you there next week. And you know what? I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me today, and I look forward to seeing you soon.
Yeah, again, it was my pleasure. This is great. I appreciate all the stuff that you guys do, just to get, like I said, to inform people about what's going on with folks and companies in the industry. So well done.
Thank you, Steve. Have a good one.
All right, thanks, you too.